Hey, this is David Rovics with another episode of Fifth Estate Live, which comes to you every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern on various platforms, including the Facebook page of Popular Resistance, and here in Portland, Cable Community Radio, and various other places. And then it all gets archived at fifthestate.org. You can see the past episodes and this one after it gets archived in both video and audio form. And today we are spending the hour with a number of authors, including Cara Hoffman, who is one of the folks coordinating the next issue of the Fifth Estate, which is the Anarchist Review of Books. Today, Cara and I are having a discussion with a number of the authors involved, which you see in front of you if you are watching on a video platform. The Anarchist Review of Books is edited by a collective based in Austin, Detroit, Chicago, New York, Oakland, and Seattle. ARB brings you intelligent, subversive, non-dogmatic writing with an anti-authoritarian perspective, publishing work by and about radical voices in fiction, poetry, cultural criticism, and creative nonfiction. Anarchist Review of Books is dedicated to the transformation of society through literature and through open, incisive critique of the media, politics, history, art, and writing that shape our world. Just to briefly introduce the participants today. Panagiotis Kechagias is a writer, editor, and translator based in Athens, Greece. His first book, Final Warning, was shortlisted for the Greek National Book Award, the Balkanika Prize, the Anagnostis, I should practice these things, Anagnostis Prize, and the, oh my goodness, another wonderful prize with a Greek name. His short story, the third book, appears in this issue of Anarchist Review of Books. D.G. Gerard is an activist, student, bookseller, and core editorial collective member of the Anarchist Review of Books. They are based in Berkeley, California. D.G.'s piece on housing and their review of Uncanny Valley, a critique of big tech's labor practices, appear in this issue. Jenny Polak's writing reimagines domestic space as a political arena and gathers people to create together in public space. She uses a range of media to make public and socially engaged projects, architectural installations, drawings, and useful ceramic objects. Her background in architecture and her family history of migration drives her projects about outwitting hostile authorities, citizen, non-citizen collaborations, racist profiling, and abusive prison and detention practices. Her piece, Migrant Boats, Far, appears in this issue of the Anarchist Review of Books. And Masani Landfair takes materials considered undesirable and redefines the worth and meaning already contained within them. She uses traditional collage and assemblage to create abstract social commentary, dream landscapes, and everyday spaces. Landfair grew up in South Chicago, where the industrial environment contrasted with the teachings and ways of her Southern grandparents, who lived there with much of their Southern culture uninterrupted from their transition through the Great Migration. These influences shaped her views of beauty and worth. Her piece Catch-22 2 appears in this issue of the magazine. And with that bit of introduction, I'm handing it over to Cara Hoffman, who is also one of the editorial collective members of the Anarchist Review of Books and an author herself as well, who we talked to a few weeks ago. Just unmute yourself if you would. Let's see, you're still muted there, Cara. Cara, let's see. You have to unmute yourself. I think I can't do it from here. Can I? Let's see. Unmute.
Thank you. For
I don't know how anyway, no idea what just happened, but there we go. Sorry.
Thank you so much for having all of us on. I'm very excited to have two artists and two authors who worked on the issue. And I would say all of us are people whose work has some activist elements to it, as well as being immersed in fine or literary arts, or in the case of Danny Gerard, journalism. And so I'd like to talk a little bit with each of you about the work that you have in this issue, and then maybe go on from there, and we can have a discussion of how this work is integrated. And so I'd like to actually start with Jenny Polak. Your piece that you have, the piece that you have, Migrant Boats Far, I wish that you would be able to elucidate for us what's going on with this piece, as well as the work that you're doing in general about migration.
Yes, hi. Thanks for having me on, Cara and everybody. So I started doing a series of drawings of the sea with tiny boats doing battle with the waves after having, or during a residency I had in the south of France, where I had gone, where I wanted to be closer to the Mediterranean migration crisis, really, in Marseille. And so that's where I kind of came across some of the amazing boat rescue outfits that a few of them come in and out of Marseille from time to time, although mostly not. But I was actually on a broader project that was making connections between forced migration in the past and the history of the slave trade in France, and how it kind of affects or relates to the present day migration crisis. And my background of working in migration politics in general has mostly been in the US, actually, around enforcement, around the expansion of immigrant detention here, and working with communities that are making great efforts to stop the private prison industry from expanding in their communities. So in a way, the drawings are kind of meditation, a kind of side or background work for me to think about things, because I love ink and brush handling, and I just, it's meditative for me in a way, but a lot of my work is more directly of an activist kind. And right now I'm working, in fact, with people in Queens who have experiences of incarceration, on a project that I have, a large public sculpture at Socrates Sculpture Park right now called Offshore, which is a kind of reference to Rikers, which is close to that park, and which is incorporating increasing numbers of messages from people who previously were incarcerated, and now finally some messages coming out from the jail itself as well.
Fantastic. And that's a collaborative project then.
Kind of, yeah. I sort of set up the framework in order to get the fellowship, if you like, to kind of just get a sculpture fellowship there. And then I said to them, actually, this is going to be a participatory thing. And they sort of helped, they were very helpful connecting me to a great local organization, which is a re-entry organization for women, especially housing and support services, called Our Children Working Women's Group, and also a much bigger and much more sort of known, I suppose, group that works with re-entry and all sorts of services within prisons called the Fortune Society. And they, I was able to participate in various Zoom sessions over the summer, meeting with those, they had writing groups and also just groups just talking about their experiences.
Excellent.
And those led to the production of some short messages, poems, in some cases just little pieces of text, which I'm printing on pennants, which are kind of gradually obliterating the fence in the piece. I'd have to show you pictures, but I can't. So, but actually in the background of this picture, of my picture, if you're looking at the picture, you can see my you can see a couple of pennants there.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
There. Those are some of the pennants, because I'm in production on a lot of pennants right now. I sew them here in my studio.
Yeah, lovely. And I think Mark has an image. We have an image of the piece that that appeared in, or we're trying to technically put it together, the image that you had in the book review. Fabulous. It's so interesting. And I think that this part of what you were talking about, especially having to do with housing, has a lot to do with what Danny wrote about in this issue. One of the pieces that Danny Gerard had in this issue was an interview with Moms for Housing, or the lawyer for Moms for Housing. Oh, here is, I don't know if we're seeing the screen. We're seeing Masani's piece now. And well, anyway, so I was wondering if Danny, if you would like to talk about your piece regarding housing and your interviews with people.
Yeah, sure.
Moms for Housing, yeah.
So this piece was inspired by the work of Moms for Housing. I think that work sort of grew out of this really hopeless housing situation that's developed in the Bay Area, or at least it feels hopeless, or it felt, past tense, hopeless to a lot of residents here. There's been a tech boom, obviously, in the area, and a lot of very wealthy people moved in, bought up a lot of property, a lot of rich landlords, and sort of displaced the community, which had been here for many decades, a community of artists and also of Black people who had moved, from the South to the West. And so I think that Moms for Housing really managed to get a very radical message out into the media in a way that was just impressive to me. They got headlines about how housing, is a human right into newspapers that are, quite conservative, I would say. They managed to get articles written about how, landlords were unethical, and, I thought that was very impressive. So I wanted to, get the message of their organization out to as many people as possible. And they achieved what they did by having a squat at a house where it was very well organized. There was a lot of work and planning put into it. And there were a lot of people who were very dedicated to, trying to do something that would change how people saw housing in the area, and how people saw, they wanted to make it really clear how unethical the current system was. And so it was like an organic sort of thing that formed around a few homeless mothers and their children. They all decided to occupy a building that was owned by a speculator landlord and had remained vacant for years. So they moved in, and they had a lot of support behind them from the community, and they were able to occupy the house for a number of months before they were finally evicted. And the media attention that they received, I think, really changed the conversation about housing in the area. So it was really great to be able to interview the lawyer who represented them in court. And she's pretty radical herself. She has been doing work in housing rights for her entire career. And she is very excited she was very excited to represent Moms for Housing in court. Yeah.
We were so excited to have that piece, and I know that a lot of investigative, and I know it was a long process before you actually got the the interview that it was something you had been thinking about for a while, and it was part of how we were conceiving of how we were going to be putting the issue together around some of issues having to do with, we have a couple different pieces on housing, and that one, and then one written by A. Rose, who we commissioned Masani to make her piece, where she created Catch 22 too, specifically for that piece. And I'm wondering if Masani, you could talk a little bit about the process of about your work and collage and making this piece, and how it relates to your other work, specifically around issues of housing and housing precarity.
First, thanks for having me here. When I was asked to do the piece, I was sent the article, the short, and it really resonated in a lot of ways. I've had housing insecurity. I've been homeless for a month and a half. It was a really harrowing experience. And as I went through the experience, I saw what was happening not only to myself and my family, but what was happening in the system. So when I read the short and pieced together the collage work for A. Rose's piece, it was very personal. I'm also a survivor of domestic violence. So both of those things just kind of were automatically there in my understanding. I've been doing collage since I was little. I grew up in Chicago. I've only been in Georgia for about 5 years now. Mm-hmm. And I grew up, as David said, with Southern parents. So I was exploring things. We grew up like people live now. We had chickens, we had a garden. We repurposed everything. So now it's a fad. Back then it was like, so collage and mixed media or assemblage has always been part of my work process, even before I became a professional artist.
And here we briefly had an image of your piece with A. Rose's essay.
Yeah, those majority of the images are photographs that I've taken. The center image of the two women was a found image. Mm. And it related perfectly to the story, which was surprising in the end, because when you first start reading it, it's universal. You don't understand that this may be a white woman. And even after you finish reading it and see what she went through with her mother, it's still universal. So mm-hmm. It was, I really liked the way it was crafted.
Yes, I think so many of the things that we're writing about in the Anarchist Review of Books, and the things that we're covering have to do with class. Part of what creates a sense of universality about it is that we are dealing so much with class, and that experience is an experience anybody, I think, in that kind of situation could financially could find themselves in. So it's so that makes sense to me. Yeah, fantastic. And Panagiotis, we have a piece by yours in the issue called The Third Book, which is a short story. And I wonder if you would be able to talk about the story and also about your work a bit as a translator. You're a translator, as well as being an author. You have translated Cormac McCarthy, you've translated Melville, and you've also translated for Golden Dawn Watch. And so I'm wondering if you could talk about some of those things, if you could talk about the integrative practice that you have going on here as far as writing literature and then translating literature and then your political work?
Well, I wouldn't call it integrated. I mean, to switch from one to the other, I need like sometimes days, and one intrudes upon the other. So, okay, I'll start with a story which is not overtly radical, but things creeping from what I believe. And it's, well, I've had a fixation on Borges for quite a while. That's no secret here for anyone that has read my short story collection. It's very evident. So I started this story as another Borgesian study. It's about the third book of Homer, which does not exist, and it is housed in a library that has only a single book. And if you go in to read it, you can read it, but then you are executed. So I was, because I've done this, I had done this many times, the Borgesian idea, and looking at it from different sides. I was kind of annoyed with myself, and I wanted to break away from it. And so the second part of the story arose in my mind, which is kind of simpler, easier said than done. And I thought that I've broken that there in the middle of the story, that I'm breaking with the Borgesian mode, but now I'm not that sure. Anyway, I think it's a story about first love and also access to knowledge, and also repressive regimes. The square that's described at the beginning is a Saudi execution square. They actually make them with sloping sides for spectators, something which I find, it blows my mind away. And of course, now that the story is 3 years old, I've been published. I'm not that sure that I've succeeded in breaking away from the tyrannic hold that Borges has on me, especially my shorter writing. Yes, that's about the story. That's if you want anything to ask me about it.
And I do think that there is the fact that we have there's this intense beauty and this intense desire, and then there is the risk that you'll be killed, right? Essentially, you're achieving knowledge and you'll be punished for it, which of course is a very old story. And without belaboring any of the Borgesian, you've been called the Greek Borges. You compared to Borges quite a bit, but without belaboring that for folks who may not be familiar with the work, I'm wondering if you could talk about that sense of repressive regime and in your own translating in your life and your practice. I mean, you lived for a time in Exarchia. You live not too far from the squat Notara, which I actually wrote about for the last time David had me on the show, talking about in the piece that I wrote about Exarchia. And you have quite a lot of experience living there, being in Athens, being in the midst of what were various uprisings, and then helping to participate in a sense in getting the word out about Golden Dawn and disseminating information about what they were doing. And now, of course, we've had a wonderful political turn in Greece having to do with Golden Dawn. I'm wondering if you could talk about some of that.
Well, living in Exarchia is, I've lived on and off for a number of years there. And I was there when Alexis Grigoropoulos was murdered by the police. I don't know if you're aware. It's the 6th of December 2008. And I was living there at the time. And it's a strange place to live because it's very radical and very vibrant, very alive, but also a neighborhood. like many others. Well, not like the suburbs, but a neighborhood like many in the center or around the center of Athens. And there are many wonderful things happening there, like the squats, like artists creating and sharing, and there's a Sunday school for migrants to learn Greek. There's all sorts of stuff. And then there is the representation of this like really very tiny place. I mean, it's like, geez, in New York blocks, it must be like 2 or 1.5. I mean, Exarchia proper is...
Exarchia proper, I think it's, well, I won't get technical with you. Yeah, it's a small space.
And the representation in the media is so outsized. I mean, if I haven't seen TV in quite a while, like actually sitting every day to watch the news or TV, but from what I'm getting of Facebook or friends, I mean, it's like this lawless border place that you don't want to, you know, set foot in because you're going to be robbed or killed or raped or whatever. Which is, you know, there's some small time, some minor crime happening because it's the center of the city, and also because of other problems, especially with how police operates there. But it's, I think a lot of things hinge on Exarchia at certain times in a government's arc, in the 4-year election cycle. When things start getting shaky, Exarchia pops up a lot in the media narrative. And it's actually a great place to live, with lots of problems, but also lots of great things to see and do and feel. It feels a lot differently than other places I've stayed in Athens, which are mere places to live or stay, whereas Exarchia is kind of like a deeper thing and has its very own color. Now it's invaded though by Airbnb. Well, not now it's kind of frozen, but it will go on. It's invaded by Airbnb, and it remains to be seen if it will be gentrified in the next, I don't know, 3 to 5 years. The metro is coming also, so it's difficult to say. Now, as to Golden Dawn Watch, that's a watchdog organization specifically set up to monitor the trial of Golden Dawn. The trial of Golden Dawn is, I think, the biggest trial Greece has ever seen. Had 69 defendants, and I think one died, and we were down to 68, something like that. An enormous case file. And I was brought on as the Greek to English translator. I had to translate the commentary on every day of the proceedings, which there were 3 every week for the years that the trial went on. Okay, there were some strikes, and I wasn't there from the beginning. I was like from like the 40th or 50th day of proceedings. And it was basically grueling work, because not only do you have to be really fast and accurate, but your whole week revolves around these people doing these things that you can't really understand the reason for such hate and brutality, and I was always opposed to such things and political spheres, but I was watching it from afar. Translating for Golden Dawn Watch gave me the opportunity to go like really close and have access to many of the details, exactly what happened that day, where, what did they use, what did they say afterwards, what did the police do, which was an instructive experience, but as many instructive experiences, it took its toll. I mean, I lost a lot of faith in humanity the years that I was working for Golden Dawn Watch. I'm really proud of my work there, and fighting Nazis with translation is a rare thing and probably not much needed. Other kinds of fights are much more useful, but that's what I could do, and I'm happy I did it.
Yes, I think we're all happy you did it, to have that work, have that work be accessible for people who are speaking and reading English, to know what's going on there. That's really important work. I'm thinking about how all of us are trying in some ways to build community and are working within community, and how we are using art and language to do that. And Panagiotis is saying that fighting Nazis with translation, it might not be as necessary as fighting Nazis, but we are all engaged in this artistic process, or this journalistic process. And I was wondering if we could have a little bit of a discussion about what that's like to be a radical and an artist. How are we feeling about that? How are we using our work? How are we integrating with community? How are we trying to make community? And Jenny, I know you've had lots of experience with this, and I'm wondering if you could speak to this.
Yes, I mean, I think I'm a bit of an anomaly in doing this kind of work, because often people best placed to do work in community are people who are from within the community itself, whereas I'm a kind of very rootless, floating person. I'm an immigrant from England here in New York a long time, but I still feel that I'm a kind of I grew up feeling outside of any community, or most communities in England too. So anyway, I think what I try to bring is the conviction that you actually can pick up the threads of an existing struggle that a community is going through, if you're listening well, if you're kind of standing with the people involved. And I try to stand up for the idea that one could come from the outside and still do good work, if you like, and still do make work that provides a platform for the community and provides whatever access I can bring to expand their own conversation out further than they might otherwise have.
To amplify the voice too, I feel. And I'm thinking about your work, and I'm thinking about your public, the very public works.
Yes.
I think, yeah, it's like, to me, and I'm thinking about the work that you did. You recently had work in Miyako Yoshinaga, that if you could talk a little bit about that. I feel that you're dealing with a subject that's so brutal, and you're creating something very beautiful, but also very contemplative from it. I'm thinking about the tiles, and if you could maybe talk a little bit about that. That I feel like is a very good example of amplifying that voice, or drawing people in through the beauty of what you're making, so that they can understand, I think, what's going on.
Yes, I have tried to use ceramics in the past couple of years as a way of creating something that does speak to the violence of mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex or whatever, but also can kind of infiltrate the domestic setting of ordinary, of people. So I did before I worked on those tiles, I worked on a project, for example, in Gary, Indiana, and its neighbor, a kind of community in Hobart, where they were facing a private prison company that was seeking to build a very large new prison there, and people in different ways were trying to stand up to that process. And one of the interesting things I had found in a couple of years before that, when the government started to try to build prisons in the Midwest for immigrants, the first community to stop it, really, to stop a private prison behemoth in its tracks, was south of Chicago in Crete, Illinois. And I did a project with people there, just kind of documenting what they had done in images and the discussions that they'd had in their village council meetings and things like that, to be able to find that one point at which the planning process could actually stop the federal intervention into their community. There's the building of immigration prisons is a federal-driven process, but it turns out that local small communities have a final last-ditch opportunity to basically deny planning permission to those very, very wealthy companies who come in and pay off everybody, and they pay even the preacher, to start saying, we need these jobs and things like that. And so people, there was a lot of actual kind of community education needed, starting from there and then going on, as we could see that defeat wasn't going to be the end of the story. There's a lot of money in it from the government just being offered kind of. And so when I got to Hobart, which is a kind of a working class community, but whiter than Gary and kind of on the edge of, it's contiguous basically with Gary, but it thinks of itself as very different. And but people were organizing there, and they needed a way to sustain quite a long-term fight. It takes sometimes years to get through these things. So I met with the people there and used some of my drawings to make these ceramic boxes, small boxes, which I could then, by doing that, I could make multiples. So it's sort of like being able to do a print, but it's an object which you can imagine in various kinds of people's homes as a keepsake or an ornament or something. But then by using the language of the keepsake or the ornament, I in fact illustrated used images of the people's struggle, the people with their signs, people at meetings, and the sites where the prison was possibly going to go, and so on the object that I was then be able to give back to the people to have in their home. So, sorry, it's a long-winded description, but if you have something that can go into somebody's home and then stay there because they like it, then it sparks conversation going forward for them, their friends, their family, which is often the challenge for them to kind of spread the word in their own community.
Absolutely. I mean, fascinating kind of both propaganda and filtration, and also, commemorative. It's really fascinating. Interesting. I'm wondering, Masani, if you have anything to say.
You're echoing a lot. Can you put those headphones back on? I think people can't understand you. Yeah.
Really?
There's some kind of bizarre echo that suddenly kicked in. If you put the headphones on, it should.
I don't have them here. I'm not hearing the echo now.
It stopped.
Okay. I think it may have been I think there may be something with Jenny and I speaking at the same time.
The software kicked in.
But Masani, if you could also speak to the work that you've been doing, how you feel as an artist, you're able to use your work as as a communicating vessel politically.
When Jenny was talking about community, I was thinking about the fact that I live in Frump country. I live in northern Georgia, and there's really no community for me here. But there's good people. But the overall is, you know, the parades with the pickup trucks and the flags. So my community has become spread out, and my work within that community is my activism. A lot of my work deals with the environment and deals with the social issues. So like right now I'm working, I've finished a piece and it's virtually online in an exhibition in Miami dealing with the Biscayne Bay pollution from the city. And I'm also part of a project in Chicago called Third Coast Disrupted, which deals with the same issue of how climate change is affecting us on a slide because people are not really accepting it large scale. And it deals with, my piece in particular deals with community and how many people were dealing with flooding, but they didn't realize it was from the fact that infrastructures were being built and taking away from retention, natural lands that retained water. And you take that with climate change and you have massive amounts of flooding and mold growing and health issues, which causes emotional and financial issues. So it's just like a trickle down problem. So a lot of my work right now is centered within myself, within my space, but it spreads out through means like this, connecting with different groups and working with them to get just core messages out about housing, sexism, environmental issues, racism, domestic violence, things like that.
Fantastic. Yeah. And Danny, did you have something that you'd like to say about your activism and about the writing you've been doing? I should say that you also wrote a piece, in addition to the piece you wrote about housing, you also wrote a piece about the book Uncanny Valley and about tech, big tech, and labor practices in the tech industry. And you have a very interesting story, actually, regarding your... you have a very interesting... You can't hear me? Maybe could you mute?
I can hear fine. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
If Danny, if you'd like to talk about your experience in the tech industry and how that informed your understanding of a book that I think everybody is excited about, big tech, but your read and your read on this book and your analysis of it, and has a lot to do with understanding labor in a different sense through both your activism and your personal experience.
Yeah, so I guess my activism informs my art in that it is an important part of my identity, I guess. And the beliefs that fuel my activism are the same beliefs that make me a person, I guess. And so when I write, those beliefs naturally come out as well. But I don't, if I'm writing fiction, I guess my primary goal is to write something that is a good piece of art. But I think because I have strong beliefs, that usually comes through even on an unconscious level. But yeah, with the Uncanny Valley piece, I was inspired to write a review on that because a lot of why I ended up with the beliefs I have now, it was because I came to this area interested in working in tech as like a very naive early 20s, person. And I had a lot of very intense experiences trying to break into the tech world that sort of showed me the reality of the situation and, what Silicon Valley was really like. And also, as I was around and I started becoming interested in problems like homelessness, I mean, I went to a programming school that was unaccredited but free. And while I was there was a homeless encampment that was like right in back of the dorm where I lived. It was right on the train tracks. And to walk to the grocery store, you had to walk through the homeless encampment. So I started talking to the people there. And I started talking we had people who would come in to the school and talk about how they were trying to come up with tech solutions for homelessness. They were trying to make an app for the homeless people, or they were trying to, figure out some way that tech could solve homelessness. And so I was interested in this at first. I was like, oh yeah, it's great. I'm glad someone's doing it. And then, you look at the solutions they were presenting for more than a few minutes and you realize that that's not what these people need. I mean, and I think that really started to make me think about things differently. That and a number of other experiences I had. I'm trying to think of some other.
And could you talk actually a little
things
bit
to
about
say
your
about
work
it.
on the Anarchist Review of Books, because you've come in as a full member of the editorial collective. You weren't just, you published 2 articles, but you also had a lot to do with the planning and the organizing and discussing. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that process, we're sort of working with an intergenerational, pretty diverse group of people on the project.
Yeah, it's been really nice working on the project because I, really have no formal experience at all. I just like to write. And so I felt very lucky to be brought in on this project because I felt like I was learning from everyone. I definitely enjoyed the process, and I don't really know
I
if
didn't mean
there's
it for it
much
to be
more
an
I can say
endorsement
about
of the magazine. I'm just more with.
Yeah, I mean, but that's my honest answer. So
I would say
go.
one of the things that I've really enjoyed about it is that, and having you be a part of the collective, is that things are shaped very organically, that by people's desires, our desires to research something or investigate something or interrogate something, whether it's a work of literature or whether it's the kind of work that you've been doing, which has been very journalistic. And I also think it's been great that you've come in with such a desire, and that has informed your ability to write these pieces that have just been fantastic, and work with a number of different editors on them. And so it feels to me rooted, I think a lot of your work feels to me rooted in a very traditional anarchist DIY sensibility. I'm interested in this thing about housing. I'm going to research. I'm going to find out all these things about housing. I'm going to look into this. I've read about it, and now I'm going to investigate it myself. So to me, the work that you've been doing feels so quintessentially anarchist, and it's really rooted in the very best things about anarchist organizing and anarchist investigation. So that's
thanks. No, I had some very strong interests, and I was really glad I was able to pursue them for this project. I think that it's just issues that would sort of grind on me all the time, and like I'm just like, why aren't more people talking about this? I mean, people talk about it, of course, but in a way that's like very diluted and not presenting actual solutions. So yeah, it was very exciting to be able to focus in on them.
Yeah, thank you. David, how are we for time? I'm just curious.
Oh, we are just fine, but we got 10 minutes before the top of the hour anyway.
Okay, is that what time is that?
Oh, well, it depends on what time zone you're in, but that would be 11 o'clock on the West Coast, 2 o'clock on the East Coast.
Right. So we have some more time to discuss this.
Oh yeah.
Fantastic. And I did want to say that many of the things that we are dealing with could be considered. I think everybody here has some sort of finer art component to the things that we're doing. Panagiotis, I know you are a novelist and you've been working very hard at, you've been writing in English in addition to writing the work that working and publishing in Greece and working having published in Greek. You've also been at work on a book that is in English. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, the sort of what the finer art or the more literary art aspect of what you're doing and what informs that work.
Well, pain, I'd say, but yeah, I was gonna say what Danny said earlier, that when you're writing fiction, I mean, you just want to write something that's beautiful, if you can make it, and reach the end, which is difficult in itself. So yeah, I don't know. I'm comfortable writing in both languages, and I'm turning. I mean, after the publication of my first short story collection in Greek, the process kind of intensified, and I'm turning into a weird hermit mole-like creature. I don't go out as much. I don't participate as much as I did. And now I understand how, in what sense, literature is the sedentary trade. But I also think that fiction, at least there's a number of ways you can practice it. You can practice it as a vessel to tell a story, or to present characters, or to send a message. But also there's, as William Gass has said, a book is a kind of verbal sculpture. Fiction is a kind of verbal sculpture. Apologies to the artists present. And I find that fascinating. And for me, at least, the beauty of the language is first and foremost. And then, and of course, that it can't be empty. There has to be something upholding it. I mean, some idea or some mission or something. But I do think that in fiction, that's the first. And stories are, repeated all the time. It's like again and again and again. You hear the basic same template, and I think you either need a unique voice, or you need a style, a linguistic style that will make someone who reads it feel something new. That's what I'd like to say on this.
And this is a question for everyone thinking about that, because I know we all are concerned with beauty. And even in putting together the Anarchist book review, I will say we made significant aesthetic changes from, this is a special issue of the Fifth Estate. We made significant aesthetic changes from what the Fifth Estate was. And I would say also some definite changes in the voice of the magazine. And so beauty was our concern. The art director, Mark Lepson, who was the art director for this issue, was very concerned with putting everything together so that it fit and it was lovely. And we're looking at the cover now. This is Ben Durham's cover that he did of the book review, a piece called Was She Guilty Because She Ran? And so we have this great concern with what people might consider the superficial aspect of what we're doing, right? It's art, it's lovely, it's something to look at, it's something to draw you in. And I'm wondering, since we're all engaged in that, do you think of yourselves in any way consciously as propagandists? And what do you have to say to the idea that that art as propaganda, that's not, it's not real art then, it's just propaganda? Or if you're making art that's activist art, there seems to be a discussion or an argument going on about what is good work, and having an overt idea or an overt expression of an ideology would make something not good work. And I'm wondering, just open up to anybody who would want to say anything about it.
I'll say something.
Yeah.
So I think that I guess everyone who makes art or writes or tells a message is always selecting what they're going to say. And I think that, you know, if you're selecting for a message that is against hierarchy and, you know, like humanitarian, then I think that, I mean, that's what I do. And I think that that is, in a way, definitely under some definition propaganda, but everyone is always, you know, selecting what they want to say and what they don't want to say. And I think that nobody is immune to crafting a message. And when people look at something, they say, oh, this isn't propaganda, they're really just saying that this thing is very much a part of the mainstream culture. But I do think that sometimes artistic works suffer if they are built around an idea first and not enough thought is given to their aesthetic beauty. But I mean, it's a different story with journalism, because the whole message is to convey news or an idea. So,
and to convey it elegantly. It's true, though. I mean, there is some aspect of crafting in journalism as well, that you want it to be the pill that you can slip into the dog's mouth and the glob of peanut butter or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
But I agree. I think your point about that if people feel like they're not seeing propaganda, what they are often seeing is the ideology of the dominant culture. That it doesn't feel like propaganda to them anymore. It's something seamless, right? It's the sea in which we swim. Yeah.
Yes.
Other thoughts about your own personal work or the idea of the aesthetics versus propaganda? Yeah, Masani.
Yeah. I think artist and art is the last confrontation point of our minds. Artists are freer in their thoughts. They go to next levels. And I noticed that during the beginning of the pandemic, shelter in place, people were able to collect themselves, see what's really going on around them, spend time with one-on-one with their children, their families, work from home and realize that they didn't have to go out and do all this processing. And I think that scared a lot of people, that they could actually rest and think and process. And that's what artists constantly do. We don't rest because we all in our heads, but we can see things differently, and we present that So it may be perceived as propaganda, but we're just throwing the reality of what's happening back into a person's or a group's face. I think we hold a lot of truth in our work, and that's scary for people who want to control how you think, how you do what you do, and how you process things. So I understand, that it is seen as propaganda. It's seen as delusional almost, to the normal culture. But I always, I guess, being biased as an artist, it's not. We just see the BS, and we're putting it back out there when it comes to political or social art.
Yeah, beautifully said. Beautifully said. I think about what Jenny was saying about being an outsider, and being an outsider that's able to express what's going on in different communities, coming and looking at it from the outside, and having that
Right.
also be integrated. Yeah, well said. Lovely. Do anyone else have thoughts on this? I know we're approaching the end of the hour. But yeah, Jenny.
No problem to go over, since we're not on TV or anything. So there's no overlap problem with the next program or anything.
I don't know. There we go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, my heater is making that noise again. Yeah, I think I feel like I've been doing this for a long time, and certainly have been better. My work has been better received in these kinds of very difficult times than at times of more kind of people are kind of retreating and more I guess think that things are going to be okay for whatever reason, and that they don't have to be vigilant and don't have to be activists. And then those periods, I have felt that my work is less welcomed, I think. But at times like this, I feel it's absolutely, there's a sort of great necessity for writing and visual interventions that give people a kind of handle a little bit on ways to frame things, ways to see through the bullshit and stuff. And I think, but to me, beauty is a huge part of it, and I feel like maybe that's the way you kind of are that's how you infiltrate people's minds, or the debates that are going on. And I just love making things that people really want to get their hands on, or really enjoy looking at, or something that then also give them a different vantage point, literally, or give them a kind of a handle on the injustices around them and things like that.
And it's true about, the fact of making something beautiful, the fact of providing something of beauty to people, that in and of itself is such a gift that we all need to be able to experience joy. I think people are feeling, especially now that everybody's been locked down and everybody's been inside, so many more people are turning to literature and to art, and really realizing the significance of these things in our lives, that these are the things that have made life in so many ways worth living, especially when we are cut off from doing things like being outside or being in community. That the refuge that we have, art is such a refuge for us humans, for all humans, that it's a part of how we function as animals. Yeah. So I would just say, having worked on the editorial collective and with everybody's work and gone through this process with everyone, that we were so excited and so happy to bring quite a number of challenging and truly significant and beautiful works for this inaugural issue of the Anarchist Review of Books, and just very proud of the work that's in it. And if anyone would like to, here again is the cover for all to see. And if anyone, I believe there are other, the articles are about to be live on the Fifth Estate website, and you can see some other images also on the FE website. Here's some of the beautiful pages that we have. Here you go. That stuff. And I would encourage everybody to subscribe to Fifth Estate, because I'm excited about continuing with the Anarchist Review of Books and having continuing this conversation, this sort of broader conversation, and the fact that we have artists and we have writers whose work is in conversation, and we are trying to do something different right now. We're trying to do something different in publishing, and we're trying to do something different in critique, and take the conversation back a little bit from the normal conversation that has to do with either a type of elitism or a type of commerce. And so those are the two things that we're trying to avoid. And I'm so happy to be working with all of you and all of the rest of the folks who worked on the review, because I think now is a time where people are truly understanding that we have to step away from the gatekeeping process that says that a thing has value if it makes money, or a thing has value or if it has to do with a particular type of elitism. And all of you are definitely making that kind of work, and it's very, very exciting. David, I'm wondering if you have any other questions for us, or if there's anything else you would like to talk about.
Oh, I just love everything everybody has been saying, and I just would want to resonate with all of that. But I guess one of the questions I always have, that I always am interested in asking anybody else who's involved with well, I guess what we call these days content creation, is how is your experience been with surviving during the pandemic, and also just in the late capitalist era of the insane housing market here in many parts of the world, but certainly up and down the West Coast, where a couple of us here are, which is sort of dominating the lives and minds of so many people for so long. But that's just one of those questions I'm always curious about. Just the survival aspect, that it seems like, at least when you hear artists interviewed on NPR, they don't ask about that. They just ask about their art, and which is also fascinating. You can talk about that forever, and that's great too. Really, of course. But yeah, the survival.
It's a great question. Panagiotis, do you want to talk a little bit about how things are in Greece? Because I think it's such a different situation there as far as coming out of the crisis. Not that we're not in our own crisis here, but it's a different situation. Could you speak to it, maybe?
Coming out of would be an overstatement, I think. I mean, I don't think we ever had time to go past it. I mean, we were plunged in the crisis in 2010 officially, but it had started before that. And then people started to say in 2017 maybe that things were 2018, things were kind of looking up. There were jobs again, and some things looked promising. Well, if you're working in the tourist sector, it's always, you always have work. Maybe not great wages, but you always have work. So then the pandemic erupted, and just things have been horrible here. We are on full lockdown for the second time for like, I don't know, I think it's the 8th week now. I've completely lost count. And being a freelancer, it's been especially hard. Everything's kind of frozen. I don't know. It's gonna be really hard, and it's unfashionable to talk about money and financial difficulties and stuff, but it's, yeah. Uh, I go back. I mean, I read Faulkner's biography a while back, and he was talking to some young protege of his, and he was like, "It's going to be difficult for you to become an artist because you'll have to leave the middle class." And I was like, "Oh, so that's what happens. I mean, you have to leave the middle class, take a step sideways and down, if you have been born in the middle class, because although there's a special section of the lower middle class that can do art at the moment, I think, at least in Greece. I don't know what's going on in the States, but it's hard. If you want to do it seriously, you pay a hefty price. I mean, if you keep your day job, you have to, I mean, work grueling hours at your writing or painting or whatever to make it worthwhile. It's all a matter of time. I mean, it always has been, and it still is. Now that things are accelerating in late capitalism and time is being, I mean, leisure time is like shrinking more and more, especially with electronic devices. And it's always been that thing, how to find time to do my own thing. That's it. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, and I think I think the other difficulty, the other decision you make, you could make the decision to step out of the middle class, or take that horizontal step or that lower step, but there is also an ethical question of, I think, what we do with our art and how we sell our art, because we're rewarded. I think there's a reward for making work that that's in many ways that's pandering, and so there are things that you can do to make money, but there are often ethical questions about you will have an ethical reckoning, I think. One will have an ethical reckoning over the type of work that they make. Yeah. Anybody else on the topic of surviving? No. Masani.
I recently had to move in the summer, and it took about 3 months to find a place, because we were dealing with redlining. We were dealing with finding a suitable space and the pandemic. So it was very stressful. We did find a place, and it's suitable. But I'm just thinking about in the future, where we're at in the pandemic, what that might bring, and I'm mentally preparing for that if I have to move again in another year or two, what that would be like. It's been very difficult as far as like looking for work or side work. I was fortunate to have some projects that I was already involved in come into fruition and happen. But I'm not sure what's next year is going to bring, you know. That's kind of been a challenge. So I've just been doing my own thing and exhibiting photography on my website, and thinking about how to generate my own marketing process through what I have. versus waiting and depending on outside entities to come in and say, oh, we'll show your work. That's been the bulk of the challenge.
And it's particularly challenging for visual artists right now because the lockdown really prevents, I think it's preventing people from having actual shows, right? I mean, you can have virtual shows right now.
Yeah, two of the shows I'm in are virtual, the AIM biannual and the Third Coast show. And one has physical space, but it's in Chicago, it's closed because they've locked everything down, which is good. But it's I think a lot of this is a whole other discussion, but the whole industry has to start looking at how to reach people and not just be on a blue chip classist system. Because there are a lot of young people that want to collect art and can't afford it, and they're not being reached. So I'm actually enjoying the fact that everything is pretty much virtual because it puts everybody on the equal field. If you couldn't go to Miami this past week when it was the big art fairs and stuff, because everything was closed, but everything is online. So anybody can go, anybody can see the work, anyone can enjoy it. And that's a good part of it. It's not good for everybody, but it's a good part.
I know what you're talking about. I early on in the pandemic when the Met Opera put all of, it was streaming and you could watch and have essentially the best seat that you had ever had. The prohibitively expensive seat that you could never have at the opera, and you could suddenly see things so clearly and so beautifully. It was, it's the Met, it was gorgeous. And I remember thinking that same thing, probably people who have never even thought about doing this are doing it now. Yeah.
The live experience is best, but you got to keep it open for everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I do think there's an interesting example. I mean, personally, I've been very lucky because I freelanced for years working in small architecture firms, and although all of that more or less ended with the pandemic because the firms are all in difficulties, I got pandemic unemployment, which I hadn't had access to before. And so it's actually freed up some, it's freed up my mind and my time to get more involved in my projects and my work. And as Masani says, also the potential of all the online communication made it more easy, for instance, for me to connect with the communities that I wanted to bring into my project in Socrates Sculpture Park, and it was easier for them to connect with each other actually, because some of their residencies are not, are spread out, so that they were able to come together more easily in their meetings, and I was able to slot into their meetings. So I'm trying to learn from that, I guess, and not go back exactly to how things were, which I don't think is going to happen anyway, but I think in so many ways it's important. There should be no going back sort of to certain kinds of structures and things that were so exclusive.
Oh, amen to that. Yeah, absolutely.
I definitely second the luck thing. I mean, like, I there's no way I'd be able to live in this area if I hadn't gotten lucky. Like, the place I live right now, it's someone who I'm friends with. Her grandmother bought this house, like, and I just happened to meet her and become friends with her, and now I rent a room in her house, and that's like how I can afford to live here. But I'm sure there are lots of other people who were forced out of the area because they didn't, they weren't so lucky to have a connection like that. I'm also still working like 2 jobs part-time, and I'm also a student. So like even still, I'm pretty busy with a lot of different things to try to keep up with what I want to be doing, and also what's going to pay the bills.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. David, any other questions for us?
Well, I think actually I could easily ask another hour's worth of questions to everybody, really, but
Yeah.
we should probably cut it off, and then I'm already planning on emailing several of you and to see about talking more on these subjects. But yeah, I mean, probably
Wonderful.
we should wrap it up, I imagine. People have
Well,
a limited
thank you
attention
all for
span
coming
out
in,
there.
talking about your work and some of these issues. And thank you all for contributing to the Anarchist Review of Books. I hope that we're going to be seeing you as regular contributors to the Anarchist Review of Books, and that you will be involved in any way that you see fit. And I want to thank David, and I want to thank Fifth Estate for giving us this great vote of confidence and letting us take the magazine in a new direction. And I want to thank Panagiotis especially for tuning in from Greece in a different time zone. And yes, thank you, David. And it's wonderful always to be on your show and have these kind of conversations.
Thank you, Cara, and thanks to everybody. And everybody can go to fifthestate.org to tune into the archived version on video and audio of this show. And thanks so much for listening, and see you all soon.